Hello and welcome to Cold War Video Quiz. I'm your host, Professor I Am Smart, and this is my assistant, Jeannie Yes.
Hi everyone, are you ready for a challenge?
We're about to embark on a captivating journey through the Cold War. And then some of our friends will test the extent of your knowledge with a super series of quick quiz questions. So listen closely, because all the answers to the questions are included in our presentation. All right then, pay attention now. Here goes. Let's start with the basic question.
What was the Cold War?
It was a period of occasional hostility and great tension, just short of actual military confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both sides feared their way of life was threatened by the other. There was also a genuine fear that either side might use its nuclear capabilities to begin World War III.
Well, actually, there were plenty of confrontations, but not directly between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. That's why they called it a Cold War. Real wars did break out in countries like Korea and Vietnam. The United States would support one side and the Soviet Union would support the other. Also, there was spying, lots of spying by both sides. These hostilities lasted nearly 5 decades, from 1945 to the early 90s.
The Cold War actually began as a struggle for influence in Europe after World War II. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged from the Second World War as the world's two superpowers. It's interesting to note that the US and Soviet Union had been allies during World War II in the fight against Hitler. But no sooner had peace been declared than the two countries began to vie for political power worldwide.
The Soviet Union had been ravaged by the war, losing 20 million people. The Soviets did not intend to be invaded again. With that in mind, they occupied East Germany and parts of Eastern Europe, setting up communist governments. The Soviets planned to use these countries as a buffer against a possible attack from the West. The Eastern Bloc consisted of Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Poland.
Winston Churchill labeled this area the Iron Curtain and condemned Soviet control of Eastern Europe. Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin alleged that Churchill's Iron Curtain statement was a call to war. Stalin announced that war with the West was inevitable and that the Soviet Union intended to produce war materials instead of consumer goods. In response to this threat, the United States adopted a policy of containment, which meant it would form alliances with weaker countries that were in danger of surrendering to Soviet-influenced communism. The United States believed in the domino effect. If one country fell to communism, then others would quickly follow.
The first battles of the Cold War began along the borders of the Iron Curtain, but soon spread throughout the world. Great Britain warned the United States that Greece and Turkey were in danger of communist takeover. President Truman and Congress sent $400 million in military and economic aid to Greece and Turkey.
The extensive aid kept the governments of Greece and Turkey in place. The Truman Doctrine set forth a policy of containment of the communist threat, meaning the United States would use its power to counter Soviet pressure wherever it developed.
The economy of Europe had been devastated by World War II. America understood that impoverished people were more apt to accept communism. In response to Europe's dire economic situation, U.S. Secretary of State George Marshall proposed that the United States provide economic aid to any European country in need. This was known as the Marshall Plan.
America sent Europe $12 billion over the next 4 years. The plan was a success. Communism had little appeal to Western Europeans once the economy of Europe was up and running.
Also, after World War II, Germany had been divided into 4 occupation zones: British, American, French, and Russian. The city of Berlin was located in the Soviet sector and was divided in the same manner. France, England, and the United States recombined their portions of Germany in an effort to help the German economy.
The Soviet Union was furious, believing that Germany should remain weak and divided. They responded by blockading their portion of Berlin and cutting off all supplies. The Americans and British countered the blockade with the Berlin Airlift in 1948. Supply planes flew into Berlin every few minutes. The airlift lasted 327 days until the Soviets gave up and lifted the blockade.
To counter the spread of communism, the United States joined Belgium, Denmark, France, Great Britain, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, and Canada to form the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Each country in the alliance agreed that an attack on one would be considered an attack on all. They would use military measures for resistance if necessary.
In 1949, the Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb. The United States was no longer the only country with atomic weapons, and atomic war became a dreaded possibility. Americans practiced air raid drills. Some people even built bomb shelters in their backyards. When Russia tested its first hydrogen bomb in 1953, the world became aware of how dangerous the Cold War was.
The fear of communism was at an all-time high. Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy waged a 4-year crusade in the early 50s to identify communists in the U.S. McCarthy labeled those who questioned his methods communist sympathizers. Many people McCarthy suspected of being communist sympathizers were blacklisted, which was an unofficial list of people who could not be given work. Many writers, actors, movie directors, and scientists were put on the blacklist, and they and their families suffered a great deal.
A Senate committee investigated McCarthy's claims and found them to be unsubstantiated. And although many careers were ruined, no one was ever imprisoned for being a communist. McCarthy was soon recognized as a troublemaker and propagandist. However, McCarthyism had a lasting impact on U.S. policy and kept the Cold War fairly heated for many years. Okay, I guess that sound means that the time has come for the questions. I hope you've been listening because round one starts now.
It's quiz time!
Hi everyone, Starstruck here at the premiere of the most amazing question ever. The stars should be showing up any minute. Name the two superpowers during the Cold War. A. England and France. B. The United States and the Soviet Union. C. The Soviet Union and Italy. Or D. Japan and the United States. Now I want you viewers to participate. Write down your answers, and at the end of the show, we'll tally the results.
Get this next question right, or you might find yourself walking the plank.
Which of the following countries was not part of the Soviet Union's Eastern Bloc? A. Spain. B. Poland. C. Czechoslovakia. Or D. Romania.
Okay, write down your answer.
All right, sailors, you saved yourselves this time. Good job. Write your answer down. We're on to brighter shores.
Put your brand on this question, buckaroos. Who coined the term Iron Curtain? A. Harry Truman. B. Ho Chi Minh. C. Winston Churchill. Or D. Douglas MacArthur. You handled that question like a real cowhand. Keep up the good work.
DJ Ricky Webb coming to you straight down the dial from your favorite radio quiz station, KVQZ. Do I have some great hits to play for you? Check this one out.
What was the U.S. policy of containment? A. Store nuclear weapons in a secure facility. B. Bring countries to the brink of war. C. Stop communism in the U.S. Or D. Form alliances with weak countries.
All right, everybody, write down your answer and I'll catch you on the flip side.
Hi there. I thought I'd come out of my bottle to throw a quick question your way.
What was the goal of the Marshall Plan? A. Revive the economy of Western Europe. B. Destroy the economy of Eastern Europe. C. Increase American military presence in Europe. Or D. Bring East and West Germany together.
That's a tough one.
Well, how did you do? Did the answer appear in a puff of smoke for you? Write it down and I will appear again later.
Oh, hello there. Just let me make this turn. All right, while we're in the open stretch, here's a question to test your knowledge. What prompted the Berlin airlift? A. West Berlin was attacked. B. The Soviets wanted supplies. C. West Berlin was becoming polluted. Or D. The Soviets cut off access to West Berlin. Wow, that was a sharp one, but I bet you did great. Write down your answer and we'll see you later.
Hello from the space station. I'm Sandy Space. True or false? Senator Joseph McCarthy imprisoned many Americans for being communist sympathizers. Wow, that was a great question. How did you handle it? Write down your answer and we'll see if it held up.
My name is Quizzitor. I am programmed to give you questions to test you. I will do so now. Which of the following is not true about the Cold War? A. It began after World War II. B. Spies were used by both sides. C. It ended with World War III. Or D. It lasted about 50 years. Write down your answers. This is Quizzitor, standing by for further instructions.
You wouldn't believe it, but this is quite tiring. Let me take a break and ask you a question before I get back to practicing. What does NATO stand for? A. North America Trade Organization. B. North Atlantic Takeover. C. New American Technology Office. Or D. North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Ah, that's a good one.
What an act! What do you think? Write down your answer, and I'll see you in the centering soon.
All right, team, way to retain that knowledge. Time for a quick drill.
Which event was a major factor in the Cold War? Was it A. Senator Joseph McCarthy ran for president? B. America declared war on Belgium? C. Canada became a communist country? Or D. Russians acquired the atomic bomb?
Great time, guys. Record your answers and we'll compare them later.
So, how was the first round of questions? I hope you zoomed right through them. We've got a lot more to cover, you know. Jeannie, I think we should discuss each country and some of the major events of the Cold War during this time period.
You know, I think we should start with Cuba, since it is the closest communist country to the U.S. You may have heard of Fidel Castro. Castro led a popular revolution in Cuba. After taking power in 1959, he allied himself with the Soviet communists.
The United States felt threatened by having a communist country so close to its borders. Something had to be done. That something actually turned out to be two major events in Cold War history: the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis.
In 1960, the U.S. planned to train a force of Cuban exiles to invade Cuba. It was assumed that the majority of Cuban citizens were against Castro's communist government. The invaders would lead these people in overthrowing Castro.
There were major problems with the plan's secrecy, communications, intelligence, and organization. When the invasion force of 1,400 Cuban exiles landed on the beaches called the Bay of Pigs, 20,000 Cuban troops backed by Soviet tanks and jet aircraft were there to meet them. The invasion was a failure. All but a few of the invaders were taken prisoner or killed.
This event between the U.S. and Cuba set the stage for the next conflict. The world nearly avoided nuclear war and what became known as the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Photographs taken by U.S. spy planes revealed that the Soviets were building nuclear missile bases in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida. President Kennedy announced that he considered this an act of aggression against the United States and that he intended to remove them.
An invasion force of 250,000 soldiers gathered in Florida poised to attack Cuba. Also, the American Navy blockaded Cuba, cutting off supplies to the island nation. The world held its breath as the two superpowers stood on the brink of World War III.
Fortunately for all of us, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev eventually agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba in exchange for ending the naval blockade and removing America's nuclear missiles from Turkey. Both sides complied, and the world breathed a little easier.
Let's talk about another country divided by communism during the Cold War, Vietnam.
The North Vietnamese allied themselves with the Communists while South Vietnam did not. Many in the U.S. felt that if South Vietnam fell to communism, other nations in that part of the world would also fall. That is why the United States became involved.
Around 1964, Americans were first sent to Vietnam in a training and support role. However, this quickly changed, and by 1966, thousands of American soldiers were sent to fight in Vietnam. The Communists under Ho Chi Minh were united in their cause and are willing to accept massive casualties. Americans at home were divided on the Vietnam conflict, and it became extremely unpopular.
The United States began negotiating with the North Vietnamese at peace talks in Paris in the early 70s. President Nixon announced a Vietnamization of the war, meaning he planned to pull American troops out, leaving the war in the hands of the South Vietnamese.
It seemed like the war would last forever, but the United States and Vietnam finally signed a peace treaty on January 27, 1973. American soldiers evacuated Vietnam. For America, the war was over, yet communism remained in North Vietnam, and eventually, South Vietnam became communist as well.
A major turning point in the Cold War occurred when President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev signed the INF, or Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. The treaty eliminated two classes of weapons systems and allowed both sides to inspect the other's military installations.
Gorbachev began to implement massive changes in the Soviet Union in the early 90s. He introduced glasnost, or openness in discussing social problems, and perestroika, a restructuring of the economy and bureaucracy. Private land ownership and free elections also were restored. Gorbachev pulled troops out of the Soviet Union's satellite nations. He also advised the nations to move towards democracy.
Communist hardliners attempted to overthrow Gorbachev. Gorbachev prevailed, resigning as the head of the Communist Party and banning it from further role in government. The 14 non-Russian republics declared their independence. The Soviet Union crumbled and the Commonwealth of Independent States formed in its place. The communist superpower had changed. The Cold War was nearing its end.
What about China? Was it still a communist country?
Yes, but the people were beginning to protest the communist government. Chinese students held a pro-democracy demonstration in Tiananmen Square. Hundreds of demonstrators were killed by Chinese soldiers. The message was clear: communism was going to stay in China.
Another more positive event was when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. The famous wall was dismantled by a celebrating crowd from both sides. East and West Germany were reunited with Soviet approval.
President George Bush and Russia's Boris Yeltsin announced the end of the Cold War and the start of a new era of friendship and partnership.
Woo! We're done with the Cold War. I'm glad we got through it because it's that time again. Time for the second round of questions. Here they come.
It's quiz time!
Thanks for tuning in to the Ricky Wave Show on KVQZ Video Quiz Radio. Boy, do I have an amazing question to spin for you. Listen to this.
Which communist country is located 90 miles from the U.S.? A. Cuba, B. Canada, C. Mexico, or D. Puerto Rico?
Okay, write down your answer.
That question rocks! So write down your answer, because I gotta jam down the airwaves. Keep listening and stay cool.
Phew! Sometimes traveling out of the bottle is very exhausting. It leaves me feeling kind of lightheaded. While I gather myself, here's a question. Who was the leader of Cuba during the Bay of Pigs invasion? A. Ferdinand Marcos, B. Fidel Castro, C. Pancho Villa, or D. Manuel Noriega? What do you think? Write down the answer and wait right here for the next question to magically appear.
Okay, team, keep up the good work. We're still in this thing, you know. The next play is to answer this.
What was the goal of the Bay of Pigs invasion? Was it A, increase Cuban imports to the U.S., B, protect Cuba from Mexico, C, remove Castro from power, or D, all of the above?
How did you do? All right, write down an answer and get back in the game. Go get 'em!
Hi, Sandy Space again. Time to blast off to this next question. True or false? China is a communist country. Any idea? Write down your answer. I think it's time to head back inside. I'm getting a little chilly.
Hello, this is Quizzitor. Time to see how much you know about the Cold War. Contemplate this one. True or false? Americans were united in support of the Vietnam War. Thank you for playing. Write down an answer and wait for the next question. This is Quizzitor, signing off.
Starstruck here, getting the latest dish on the Cold War. I like to hang out with only the hottest stars out there, but we'll give this one a try anyway. What did President Nixon mean by Vietnamization of the war? A. Join the North Vietnamese. B. Bring both North and South Vietnam together. C. Leave the war in the hands of the South Vietnamese. Or D. Put more American troops in Vietnam. What a scoop! Write down your response and let me know later. I want to be the first in the lines for Amir, so I gotta run.
Shiver me timbers. You landlubbers are pretty smart, but now you have to deal with me, salty gales. I've sailed around the world and I know a thing or two. See if you can reel this one in.
Gorbachev's changes in the Soviet Union resulted in what? A. Free elections. B. Private land ownership. C. Formation of 14 independent republics. Or D. All of the above.
How did you do? Think you're sailing strong? Good. Now write your answer down as I set sail again for the 7 seas.
Hey, I'll take a break from plate twirling to ask you this one. Which of the following brought the world close to nuclear war? A. Gorbachev's changes in the Soviet Union. B. The Berlin airlift. C. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Or D. Signing of the INF Treaty. All right, no confusion for you. Write down your answer for later and let's try on the next one.
Hey there, racing pals. It's time for a pit stop and a quick question. Then it's back to the race. What was torn down when East and West Germany reunited? A. The Iron Curtain. B. The Trail of Tears. C. The Berlin Wall. Or D. None of the above.
Will you look at that one?
Quick, write down your answer. It's time for me to get in gear and get back in the race. See you after the next lap.
Round 'em up, cowboys and cowgirls. We're at the end of the trail. Yeehaw! Which two leaders began the era of friendship and peace? A. John Kennedy and Fidel Castro. B. Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. C. George Bush and Boris Yeltsin. Or D. John Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev. Well, partners, did y'all rope in the correct answer? Write it down so you can check later.
So, how did you do? Are you ready for the answers? They're coming right up.
That's right. This is the best part. Here's where you get to see how much you learned.
We'll give you one more moment, all right? Okay. Pause the tape if you need more time. Here come the answers.
Question 1. B. The United States and the Soviet Union were the two superpowers during the Cold War. Question 2. A. Spain was not part of the Soviet Union's Eastern Bloc. Question 3. C. Winston Churchill coined the term Iron Curtain. Question 4. D. The U.S. policy of containment was to form alliances with weak countries. Question 5. A. The goal of the Marshall Plan was to revive the economy of Western Europe. Question 6. D. The Soviets prompted the Berlin airlift, cutting off access to West Berlin. Question 7. False. Although many careers were ruined, no American was imprisoned for being a communist. Question 8. C is not true. The Cold War ended in peaceful agreement between the U.S. and Russia. Question 9. D. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Question 10. D. Russians acquiring the atomic bomb was a major factor in the Cold War. Question 11. A. Cuba is the communist country 90 miles from the U.S. Question 12. B. Fidel Castro was the leader of Cuba during the Bay of Pigs invasion. Question 13. C. The goal of the Bay of Pigs invasion was to remove Castro from power. Question 14. True. China is a communist country. Question 15. False. Many Americans did not support the Vietnam War. Question 16. C. Vietnamization meant to leave the war in the hands of the South Vietnamese. Question 17. D. Gorbachev's changes in the Soviet Union resulted in free elections, private land ownership, and the formation of 14 independent republics. Question 18. C. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world close to nuclear war. Question 19. C. The Berlin Wall was torn down when East and West Germany reunited. Question 20. C. George Bush and Boris Yeltsin began the era of friendship and peace.
How'd you do?
I bet you did great.
You guys sure are geniuses.
Yeah, you are as smart as I am.
Good one, I am.
Thanks, Jeannie. And thanks for joining us for this history video quiz. See you again soon. Bye.
Amazing!
Hi there. I thought I'd come out of my bottle and to throw a quick mess up your way. Sorry.
Jeannie, I think we should discuss some of the things we were going to discuss at this time.
Great second effort. Now, get ready for your next challenge.
View all 10 titles in the American History Video Quiz Series.
Cold War,
Revolutionary War,
Wild West,
Civil War,
Industrial Revolution,
World War I,
Great Depression,
World War II,
Vietnam,
Colonial Days,